I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, January 24th, 2017 regular board meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. Would like to start by calling the roll. Ms. Kenny, will you call the roll?
Patrick Sullivan.
Here.
Betsy Baglio.
Here.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Here.
Justin Doran.
Here.
Bill Hare.
Here.
Daphne Kendall.
Here.
Greg Stankiewicz.
Here.
Connie Witter.
Here.
Evelyn Spahn.
Here.
Fern Spruill, absent. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to now adopt the minutes for the meeting of December 13th. May I have a motion? Okay, sorry. Usually I'm the one who's going too slow, so.
This is our first experience with having our board meetings online using the computer, so it's all electronic. So we'll get faster as time goes on.
Okay, so tell me when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, may we have a motion? And this is voting only for people who were at the meeting, of course, but a motion. Justin, second. Betsy?
And this is for the December
13th.
13th meeting. And this Betsy was second?
Yes.
And can you just remind people who needs to abstain, who needs to abstain from the 13th?
I can. So the vote would be, those abstaining would be Debbie, Bill, Greg, and Evelyn.
Okay. All in favor? All opposed? Abstentions? Okay, and now adoption, sorry, we have to slow down. This technology is so good that it takes a lot longer than doing it with a pen and paper.
Debbie, Bill, Greg, and Evelyn. Save it.
Okay. A motion for adoption of the minutes for the January 3rd, 2017 minute, January 27th. Justin, second Connie.
Almost there.
Wait, was that January 3rd or?
January 3rd, so this
What
was
the one before that?
December 13th.
I was there.
Okay, so do you want to, I can go back and change that.
Sorry. I thought we were doing January 3rd. My apologies.
It's okay, we'll go back and then I will.
I was at the December 13th. Mass exodus of board members.
All right, so I'm going to, just so everyone knows what I'm doing, I don't know if you can see it or not.
My apologies.
That's fine. That's why we're going slow. So it was Justin that made the motion,
And Connie, second.
okay. And Connie?
Correct.
Betsy seconded. We're talking about
Betsy.
December 13th.
Yeah,
I
December
made the motion,
13th.
Betsy seconded.
Yeah, then I have to take the vote. And then Evelyn was a yes. Oops,
Yes, thank you.
hold on, everybody. And so the abstains were Debbie, Bill, and Greg. Is that correct?
Yes.
Everyone in
Yes.
agreement with that? Okay, 1 second, I have to go back and save this motion, and then I have to delete the. So, and motion, so I have to delete this one. And 4 abstains, so there's 3 abstains. And you should be seeing everything I'm doing, right? Okay, so that should say final. Okay, moving right along.
Okay, so now, Ms. Kennedy, we're at the January 3rd. We had a motion from Justin, a second from Connie. Okay, all in favor of the January 3rd minutes? Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Yes. Betsy was absent,
And Evelyn, right?
and Evelyn was absent. Okay, now, while that's happening, can we move to the public comment? Okay.
I'm actually,
So we're now on agenda item F, which is a newer format that we have, which is a public forum limited to 15 minutes in aggregate on open topics. Is anything that anyone in the audience would like to speak about, now is the time. And I would just like to ask, we're not going to time limit anyone in particular, but just be mindful of, if how many people might be speaking, so that we don't run too far over the 15-minute time allotment. So I'd like to ask you now, if you would like to come to the microphone and make any comments, just please identify yourself, where you live in town, and anything you'd like to say. This is your time to do so. There will be a second public comment period later in the agenda for agenda items only. And I don't see any motion towards the microphone, so I think we can declare that closed. Okay, so now we get to agenda item G. Are we okay, Ms. Kennedy? So this is time for the board president's report, and in connection with that, I'd just like to say a few words about the charter school expansion and what it means to me, what it means to this district. And I'd like to start by pointing out something that I don't really pay too much mind to often, but I don't know how many people saw this, but there was a website called K-12 Niche. You can Google it. And Princeton Public Schools was rated #1 in New Jersey, which again, when I usually see those things, I sort of think, well, throw it in the closet with all the other awards we've won. We win all kinds of things for being a great, great public school. But it makes me wonder, when we have the blessing of having the #1 school in New Jersey, how does school choice fit into that? That you have the access to the #1 school, at least according to one set of metrics, and yet choice is necessary to have something different than #1. It can't be better. So it sort of makes me just pause. And I think about a few things about our school that I've seen lately in terms of my own experience. Over the holidays, there was a choir concert at Firestone Chapel, and that was the first time for me to go to that event, and it was amazing. I'm sure many of you have been there. The whole chapel was full of people from our community, and the music was professional quality, absolutely stunning, in a location that was just beautiful. And one of the things that was really interesting, it was not just the kids singing, but also alums, not just alums who were a few years older than the kids singing, but even people in their 60s and 70s all came together. You think about our sports teams and how amazing they are, how many state championships they win. But the thing I always think about our sports team is how in most of our sports, everybody gets to participate. And I've seen it happen, in those teams. Everybody gets cheered. Everybody is treated like the champion. These kinds of values are our values as a community. They create excellence, and we value that. But we also value decency. We value diversity. We value inclusion of everybody. And these aren't values that this board somehow imposed on this school system, or that this administration somehow imposed on this school system. These are the values of our community. And the way we got them, and the way they flow through the school itself, is by decisions that were arrived at democratically. That's how we operate. In November, in the last possible moment under the law, our local charter school decided unilaterally, without warning, that they would expand, potentially costing the district over $1.1 million a year in perpetuity. And the process to decide whether this expansion goes through is not democratic at all. 8 unelected Princeton Charter School board members and 1 unelected education commissioner get to make this decision, which has the potential to destroy our budget and decimate our programs. And I want people at home and people in the audience to make no mistake. A $1.1 million reduction from our budget will destroy our programs. It would devastate the quality of education that we provide here. It equals the entire sports budget. It equals the entire music budget. So those events that I just talked about, that is really so much part of who we are as a community, that's what that represents. It equals the salaries of many, many new teachers. It equals almost the entire 2% tax cap that we're allowed to raise by law, and which we have budgeted for many good things in terms of education improvements. And also, we just went through all of our union labor contracts, and we budgeted fair and sustainable increases for all of our staff and our workers and our teachers, who we value very highly. That equals the entire increase. Now, Princeton Charter School, in their public statements, have said, well, we'll find the money somewhere. But we can't just find the money somewhere. This is the first time that Princeton Charter School has come to us since the 2% cap was in existence. Some public statements that they have made have implied that we could simply raise taxes somehow. There might be a waiver. Who knows? You guys can figure it out. Well, if we were to raise taxes, which we cannot do and would not do, that's taxation without representation. Why should we be responsible for raising taxes on the people who struggle on a budget in our community, for the people on a fixed income in our community, to pay for an expansion that was not democratically decided? In the past, I've always been happy to acknowledge that the charter school exists. I've never advocated complaining about it in all of the years that I've been on the board. It costs us taxpayers about $5 million a year, but in my view, it's a fait accompli, and as long as we can coexist peacefully, then it's not worth complaining about, and we ought to be able to live side by side. But if the charter school keeps growing, keeps raiding our budget, it becomes an existential threat to this school. A growing charter school becomes, in effect, a doomsday machine. It will keep taking, and we'll have to keep cutting and cutting. And the budget, as you know, is not variable. It will just cause the schools to break. And the idea that when the charter school announced this, they said that they're somehow doing us a favor, is just so opposite to the facts, it's not even arguable. We know that class sizes will rise. We know that educational quality will suffer, and this cannot go on. But here in Princeton, we're not going to let that happen. We are going to fight. We'll fight this action in court. We'll fight this action before the commissioner. We'll fight this action in the court of public opinion, and we've barely gotten started. It's going to be long and grueling, but we do not intend to lose, because our democracy is too important, and what we've built as a community is too important. Ultimately, our kids are too important for us to let this pass. Now, having said that, we are mindful that we're all one community. The charter kids are our kids too. Many of them come to our high school, and they and we will be equally damaged by this charter school action. We would have a fiduciary duty as a board to dismantle a doomsday machine that's going to destroy the educational quality of our district. But on the other hand, we would not be against finding a way to coexist in a long-term sustainable way. Perhaps if we can find a way to coexist sustainably, there are things that we can learn from each other. That would be the best possible outcome here. The public should know that Princeton Charter School and Princeton Public School have been discussing privately and confidentially ways that we might be able to coexist financially and educationally over the long term. We've made some progress in those discussions. We hope to make more progress in the days ahead, because as a community, we do not want to fight. Finding a way forward is a sensible and correct thing to do. But while these discussions continue, we feel that we should not have the sword of Damocles dangling over our head. We can work in good faith to find a financial solution that would save us all money and might modify or amend this bright line, us against them funding formula that has always set us against one another. If Princeton Charter School can find a way to do this, it would be all credit to them. They would be heroes in this town, and maybe nationally as well. not carrying the legacy of having destroyed what we've built here. That's the choice that's before them. So tonight, I'm calling upon the trustees of Princeton Charter School to continue our discussions quickly until we find an agreeable solution. And although I believe that their application is procedurally flawed as a matter of law and is not ripe for determination before the commissioner, I'm calling tonight on Princeton Charter School in good faith to withdraw that application. They should do it now and work in good faith to find an agreeable solution, or work until we decide that no solution is possible. This request is fair and reasonable. Withdraw this destructive application now without prejudice. If we don't come to a solution, you can always reapply. Let's sit down as partners to work something out. In the meantime, if Princeton Charter School would like to change their lottery so that they have a more representative sample of students in the community in terms of minorities and people with disabilities, we encourage them to change that lottery formula now. They don't need to apply to any commissioner to do that. In the meantime, let us all sit down and that the community and parents of Princeton Charter Schools, Princeton Public Schools, and all residents and taxpayers can find a solution that will work. And I call on everyone in our community to join me to encourage Princeton Charter School to move forward constructively and withdraw their application. Thank you. Now, I'd like to just take a few minutes if anyone on the board would like to add or make a statement about this application as well. I'd like to cede a little bit of my time for people to do that.
So I would like to say I voted for the resolution in December to oppose the charter's application. And I did that with some knowledge of the charter school. After I was elected in 2015, one of the trustees and Larry Patton invited me to the charter school for a tour. I toured the building, and it's clear that they're very proud of their school, and they would like it to continue. But the point of this application and our opposition isn't the existence of the charter school. It's their request for an additional $1.2 million for 76 children. And so the one thing that I would add to what Pat said is all this would, the detriment of the Princeton Public Schools would be for 76 children. And for that reason, I voted to oppose the charter school application. Like Pat said, I'm hopeful that we can come to some middle-of-the-road agreement. This isn't good for our community. We all recognize that. We all love our children, and I think we need to all remember that when we're talking about it. Thank you.
And I would just add, I do echo the comments Superintendent Cochran and Mr. Sullivan have made about perhaps coming together, shared professional development, shared opportunities for our staff and their staff to come together in ways that benefit everyone in the community. As Superintendent Cochran says, they're all our students. And as board members, we are charged with looking out for all taxpayers and all doing what's right for the students of our schools.
My name is Connie Witter, and I've been a resident of Princeton for the last 19 years. And I joined this board because my kids went through this school system. It's a great school system, and I'm here to give back. And I would like the charter school to find a way to work with the board, to work with the community of Princeton, to work with our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on? Thank you very much. Okay, next we're going to turn to item H, the superintendent's report. And just in connection with meetings, one of the senses that we had as a board is we wanted to make sure that every meeting had a little bit of a space in the agenda for discussion and for bringing to light and bringing to the community things that are happening in the schools, things that educators are thinking about, important issues that are going on with our teachers and with our children. And also, with respect to the larger community, that how the tax base works, how school funding is calculated and compiled. And so we're sort of pushing you'll see in the agenda tonight, we're going to move pretty quickly through some of the items that we used to spend a little more time on in order to have a fairly, robust discussion about various topics. And we hope in the future to advertise those a bit ahead of time so that when people are interested in, let's say, individualized education or early childhood development, we may have someone coming to talk about that, and that we could get interested parents and perhaps interested students too to talk about some of those issues in a more discussion-like forum. So tonight, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cochran, but we have a special guest who is going to talk a bit about taxation in our community, how it works. I think it's really important given the challenges that we have ahead for everyone to understand how taxation works in our town. So I hope I didn't steal your thunder, Steve, but with that
Not
introduction.
at all. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Good evening, everyone. Those of you watching at home, I'll introduce our special guest, Mark DeShield, in just a moment. But I want to begin by noting that yesterday we had the Newbery Award-winning author Jerry Spinelli come to John Witherspoon to speak to our sixth graders. And many of you are probably familiar with Mr. Spinelli. He's the author of 36 books, including Crash and Maniac McGee. And I had the privilege of joining our sixth graders in the JW auditorium as they asked him a number of really excellent questions about the joys and the struggles of writing. And in the end, Mr. Spinelli offered this piece of wisdom: write what you care about. Write what you care about. And I think this advice to students about pursuing their passions has carryover into much of what we do in the Princeton Public Schools. His advice also has bearing, I believe, on what many parents have been doing of late. And I want to take an opportunity tonight to publicly thank all those parents and community members who have been writing to the Commissioner of Education, because what they care about are the students in our schools and the quality of education they will receive now and into the future. Their letters, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them, have been personal and heartfelt. People recognize that if the charter school's application to expand its enrollment is approved, the economic and educational impact to our district will be detrimental, and that impact will be forever. As a district, as Mr. Sullivan noted, we are continuing to talk with representatives of the charter school about ways that we can share our knowledge and our resources, and I continue to be hopeful that at some point in the future, we will be able to bring to this community an innovative vision of how we can come together to save money and enhance learning for all students in Princeton. Currently, however, the expansion application remains an impediment to truly creative conversation. The concern about losing $1.2 million in revenue to the Princeton Charter School has led to a heightened level of conversation within our community about school funding, and specifically about the collection and distribution of municipal taxes in a town with increased ratables and an increased number of residents. 85% of our operating budget as a school district comes through the tax levy. And so the questions people are asking are important ones. And I'm particularly delighted to have someone here tonight who can actually answer those questions. Mark DeShield is the township administrator. We know he had a late night last night at the town council meeting, and I appreciate him coming out again. And I just would ask that you join me in welcoming Mr. DeShield, who'll give a brief presentation and then answer questions from the board. So, Mark, thank you for being here.
Thank you, and good evening. I want to thank everyone here, the board, Superintendent Cochran, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you this evening, to give you a quick overview of the tax collection process and how we interface with the school district. Tonight I'm going to provide you the answers to, I think, a couple of questions, fundamental questions that we have about the tax administration process. And in the end, I'd like to provide you with answers to the following questions. How are our taxes calculated? What's the interface between the municipality and the school district in the administration of taxes? And how does new development impacts our tax rate? Then on the completion of my remarks, I will take questions. I think that'll probably be more interesting to you. So forgive me as I go through this process to talk about numbers, which sometimes are a little boring. So let's start with kind of an overview. And as you can see from the slide before you, the total tax levy for the municipality is split up between the school, the county, and the municipality. And as a percentage, you'll see the school district makes up 48% of the total tax we raise, the county 30%, and the municipality 22%. So let's look at how do we calculate the tax rate itself. And the first step of that process is to determine a municipal levy. And what I'll do is I'll talk about right now, specifically the municipality and how we determine it. And that start with a process, just a simple calculation. We take all of our revenue that are not tax related, subtract that with the expenditures for the years for our upcoming budget, and we come up with what we call the levy, or the amount to be raised by taxation. And I give you a simple example here, which is the calculation for last year. We had about $29 million in revenues on the municipal side only, and $61.9 million in expenditures. That gives us a levy of $32.9 million that we have to raise through taxation. This process is done very similar with the school district and the county that come up with their levies. The next thing you want to do is trying to figure out what's the actual rate. So the next calculation is you're going to take that municipal levy and divide it by the total assessed value in the municipality. What happens each year, our tax assessor determines what the total assessed value as of October 1 of each year, of the prior year actually, for the new year. And that determines our total assessed value. Simple calculation. We're taking the levy, the $32.9 million, dividing into our total assessed value, which is $6.9 billion. In the end, you'll get a tax rate, and we actually calculate your taxes based on $100 of assessed value. So in the end, you get the rate of 0.477 as a rate. And again, the next step of this process, just to bring this together, how does that work with all of the entities, the government entities that we have? So we take the municipal levy, the school levy, and the county levy. You add that all together, and the municipality is responsible for the collection of the total levy of all of those three entities. And last year, it's approximately $154 million that we will levy against the budget. And again, if we go to the next slide, we take that same calculation for the total levy, you calculate out, and you come with a rate. So this is the rate that everyone sees in their total tax bill of 2.234. And that just goes with the calculation. So now let's talk about what we really want to talk about. It's what are the impacts? And how does it impact or change affect individual property owners? But first, let's talk about on the individual level, in a person's individual home. And we usually speak of tax increases. We're talking about the impact on the average household, and that's what we use. So for example, if we say there's a 2% tax increase, that's based on the average household, what the average household increase in taxes will be. But as we all know, not everybody's taxes will increase or value will increase or decrease at the same rate. As a result, different households rates will be slightly different than the average. So as a general rule, what I would tell people is, if your value is increasing greater than the average, you may see, even though there's a 2% increase in the rate, you will have a higher average tax bill than the average person. If you're lower than the average, you will have a lower than average. Because in essence, what you're having is, once you develop your tax rate, the more money there is, the more assessed value there is, the more it's spread out to the taxpayers. So now let's look at it on a kind of a bigger level. The total assessed value impacts everyone. As I said before, the total assessed value, as that increases, in theory, when the assessed value for all the properties in town increases, it spreads out the taxes to more people. However, it is also important to note that at the same time, every year, the taxes are fluctuating. There are a lot of changes in the tax base. For example, You're having properties that are demolished, they come off the tax base. There are tax appeals, which may reduce or increase. So it's always fluctuation in the tax bill. I know a lot of people look at a new development like Avalon Bay, and they say that should be a lot of value. Sometimes it is. It depends on what's happening in the total tax base to determine what's the impact of that development. And just to give you kind of an example of what I mean there, now, before I do that, let's talk about one more thing in terms of the total assessed value. The total assessed value is $6.9 billion. New development, it would take a lot of new development to really make a change on $6.9 billion. And I'll give you an example. Avalon Bay is the example I'll use. Most properties are not new developments, are partially assessed as they're being built. As they're being occupied, there's a partial assessment being placed on those properties. Avalon Bay, for example, there's an additional partial assessment this year of $9 million. Well, $9 million is less than 1% of the total assessed value. So although it does have an impact on your taxes, and again, you'll see how small that impact is when you're comparing it to $6.9 million assessed value. And then there's one question that someone brought up that I do want to address, and that's the issue of pilots. And pilots are payments in lieu of taxes. And there are really two times where you'll see payments in lieu of taxes. And that's for redevelopment. When you have a redevelopment project, you're allowed to enter an agreement with a developer to have a payment in lieu of taxes. And what that means is instead of paying taxes, the developer pays a payment in lieu of taxes to the municipality. In that case, the municipality gets the payment, the county gets 5%, the school district does not get a part of that, and that whole value is taken off of the tax base. Now, in our case in Princeton, we have very few pilots that fit that redevelopment in. Most of our pilots are smaller, and they're usually in the area of affordable housing. And that happens because usually federal or state loan programs require affordable housing projects to enter into a pilot so that they can have a consistent tax throughout the years. And they're much smaller. We don't, and I don't anticipate that happening in the future. And there's one question I know that came up is, can you negotiate a payment for the school district? You absolutely can. But the theory behind why that isn't done is because the same taxpayer who is paying for the school district is paying for the municipality. It really doesn't make a difference in the bottom line of the tax bill who gets credit for it, because it still impacts the same taxpayer. Went quickly through that. Now I wanted to take some short as many questions you may have, so I'd like to take any questions that you may have.
Okay.
Sure, go ahead, Bill.
How much has that 6.9 billion changed over the last few years? I don't know if you have that sort of number.
It actually, I don't have the exact number, but it really does not fluctuate that much year over year. We haven't seen it move. We're actually doing an analysis of our assessed values over the last couple of years, and we've noticed it really has been very stable. It moves up and down very slightly.
Now, the pilots that you were speaking about, does the university pay pilots to us?
The university does not pay a pilot. What the university pays is a contribution, and there's a difference between a pilot and a contribution. The contribution is just a payment. It's similar to, it's paid directly to the municipality, but it's a voluntary process, versus payment in lieu of taxes is actually in exchange for not being taxed, you're paying the pilot.
Has there been a consistency over the years to what the university does pay the municipality, and is that a sliding scale? Is it increasing, decreasing? I know that you said that it's voluntary so that they don't have to give it, but how has that worked out?
It actually increases each year, and I believe there's 2 more years on that. There has been an increase for each year of the current agreement, and what we'll negotiate in the future is a continuation of that, where there's an increase each year.
So, Mark, I just want to thank you again for coming tonight. We probably have a lot more questions for you, but I just want to step back, way back to one of your first slides and just reiterate, because I've had this question just from people directly, and I've seen it in public meetings before, whenever we're having, budget issues or worrying about our own budget, and people say, and I know you said this, but I just want to reiterate it for everyone, is that people say, well, there's a lot of new construction in town, so that means the schools can get more money, right? And I think, just want to make clear that you showed it back on a couple of slides ago, but the schools build their budget, and the municipality builds its budget based on whatever constraints they have. We have a 2% cap on our budget. We can't go above that. That number goes into the pool of what we tax everyone. So as you say, if someone built a $5 billion building in town or something, the rest of us would pay would pay the pro rata share of whatever else our property was worth. So our taxes might go down in that case.
Right.
But it doesn't affect how much the schools get. It's continually capped at 2%, subject to whatever other waivers we might have in a given year, like a healthcare waiver or an enrollment waiver that will allow us to get a bit more than 2%. But in effect, the property values don't drive the amount we collect. The amount we collect is sort of fixed, and then that just becomes your tax bill.
That is absolutely.
If I've said that clearly.
You have, and I think there's a lot of confusion across the board on that issue. The tax bill is based on the levies that are determined by each one of the governmental units. So it is a fixed amount. And we will determine our fixed amount, school determines theirs, the county determines theirs, and we collect that exact amount as what we will then actually bill the taxpayers.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank you as well.
No problem.
And just to build off of President Sullivan's point, so that 2% really is a cap in conjunction with the tax levy. It's a very fixed constraint that we, as a schools, and have to operate under.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. Oh, do you want to go?
But just sort of a clarifying point, and maybe Business Administrator Kennedy can help me with this one. In one of your slides, you showed the tax levy for the district as $73.69 million. In our operating budget, it's at $70 million. So perhaps you could just highlight.
That's on our school year for 16-17. We cross over years for the taxation
Okay.
of the
Right.
town. They're on a calendar year. We're on the July to June. And then also, we have debt service as well.
Which is not included in
not
the
in
operating.
Of the 70
Right.
million.
So the 70 million is the amount of the tax levy for the operating budget. When we talk about 2%, it's on the
70 million.
70 million
Of the 16-17 school year.
of the 16-17 school year.
And
That's
now
why
we're
I'm
working
glad
on
that you have your
17-18.
job and I have mine.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Mr. Dashiell. Thank you for coming.
No problem.
There's been a lot of questions, so it really is very helpful. So I have a couple questions. My first one is, who's responsible for determining those percentages of 48, 22, and 30?
That's just based on, if you look at the slide that's there, you just take the percentages right there. That's how it's calculated.
But let's say, is there any way we could pay the county less?
No.
No. Is it determined? It's their state law? Because people have asked, why are we paying?
Basically, what happens is they tell us what their levy is.
Okay.
By law, we have to bill their levy, just as a school district.
And then my next question is, there is a pilot agreement with the Institute for Advanced Study, correct?
I believe there is.
And so my concern there is that, and does the district receive any percent of that?
I don't believe so.
So my concern is but the existence of a pilot means that they recognize that they're getting some services and they're not paying taxes. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, so would you explain it to me?
And again, a pilot, usually a pilot is received based on the fact it's not a tax exempt. There's a difference. There's a pilot. There's the voluntary contribution is usually because you're a tax exempt property, and then you're making a voluntary contribution, just as you said, because we're providing you services and you want to make a voluntary contribution. Using in case of pilots, there are other rationales why there's pilots. I'm not sure the individual case for the Institute and why that is a pilot.
Because I would posit that the school district also provides a service that it should be compensated for. So I guess my next question is, going back to the voluntary payment by Princeton University, and I know that this was before your time, so excuse my questions. Was the school district was not involved in those negotiations?
It was not.
So if the school district wanted to also seek remuneration for the services that we provide to students that are part of families not in homes that are paying tax revenue, would that be on the district to pursue that?
It would.
It would, and the township would not assist us with that?
And again, we could have conversations
Okay.
about that, but, and again, that would be something you would have to take on your own. We do a contribution, we get a voluntary contribution, and we'll continue to do that. That's something I think that, you guys would have to take talk to the university about.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask you a question, just a hypothetical, to understand what you meant when you said, well, it all comes out, if a pilot goes to the town rather than the school, it all comes out. So let's just have a crazy hypothetical. Mark Zuckerberg comes to town and he says, I really love what the town is doing, and I just want to pay everything not the school, just the town.
Right.
So I want to pay whatever it was, $34 million.
Right.
So are you saying that comes out of the taxpayer, because then taxpayers would only have to be levied for about 120
That's right.
million, and so therefore everyone's taxes would go down. Either way.
That's
Okay.
right.
And then the second example, I guess, is more for Stephanie. Suppose Mark Zuckerberg comes to town and says, I really believe in education, and I want to pay just half of your overall, but I want it to be 50% more. So instead of a 70-ish million dollar budget, I want it to be 105. And so I want you guys to spend that money on whatever you like. Do we have the ability in a 2% cap world to take that money and spend it that way, or are we limited to the 2% cap, including contributions from others?
We could take that. We could take that money, Mr. Zuckerberg. And,
Mark Zuckerberg, if you're watching.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept your money and increase, but we have to have. It depends on how it would be offered to us. Would it be an ongoing grant? Would it just be a revenue stream that we would get like a contribution each year? Yes, we could, but we'd have to have expenses, and we'd have to work really fast to try to figure out how to spend that additional $54 million.
Okay, but the point is, I guess, to Daphne's question, for pilots, to other, from, people who either don't pay taxes or aren't paying taxes for whatever reason, if it goes to the town, I understand, Mark, how it reduces the overall tax bill. But on the other hand, if we wanted to reach out to anybody for an additional contribution of any kind, it would be over and above the 2% cap.
Right.
And I just wanted to make sure I understood how that worked. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Any other questions from anyone on the board? Well, again, thank you for coming
Thank you
tonight,
very
Mark.
much.
We really appreciate your
Not a
time.
problem.
Mark, thanks again. Really appreciate it, and I hope this is the beginning of a conversation, because we may want to follow up on talking to you more about how the district can augment school funding, if at all possible. There's a lot to talk about in our schools beyond taxes and beyond the expansion of the charter schools, and I want to take just a moment to quickly give the board and those of you here tonight and those watching at home just a taste of all that's happening in our district on a regular basis. I mentioned Jerry Spinelli's visit yesterday with our 6th graders. Tomorrow, our 7th grade students in drama, 7th grade drama students, will be headed to New York City to watch a production of School of Rock and to actually attend a workshop in advance of that production that will allow them to interact with the actual actors in the show. Tomorrow will also be a very special day at Princeton High School. It's the day in between semesters, and it will be devoted for the first time to school-wide community service. The day is entitled PHS Gives Back, and it will involve students and teachers working side by side in, am I stealing your thunder at all on this one? Sorry, okay, all right. Abby's smiling at me over there. It'll involve teachers and students working side by side on a host of activities ranging from making sandwiches for distribution at the Trenton Area Soup Kitchen to making Valentines to give to seniors in local area nursing homes to, I think, designing peace flags for new schools that are being started in Nepal. And there are a number of other activities, and you can certainly elaborate on that, Brian and Abby. Last month, I did not have a chance to give a shout out to all of our fall sports teams. They had an outstanding season. I particularly wanted to mention that Jim Smirk, who's the coach of both the boys and the girls cross country team, was named by the Trenton Times as coach and one of the coaches of the year. So too is Patty Manhart, who's the coach of our girls volleyball team, who had an outstanding season. Brian, you may want to expand a little bit on this particular honor, but I wanted to mention that our Science Olympiad team recently won their regional competition. I got the sense that it involved like answering really esoteric questions and then also like building stuff like out of like a hovercraft, out of things that you found in your pockets or something along those lines. So in any case, it's very impressive, and I believe that that the Princeton team is headed to the state finals on March 7th, so we wish them luck. And finally, I wanted to say a word tonight about diversity. As part of our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan, we are explicitly focused this year and in future years on increasing our understanding of diversity and our level of racial literacy. It's a focus for all of us as professionals, and it is a focus for our work with our students. Last month, on December 13th, which was the day of our last board meeting, a team of 10 students and 5 adults from PHS joined with high schools from all over Mercer County for a second day of dialogue held at Rider University. The day was facilitated by the Center for Supportive Schools, and it focused on bias, explicit bias, and also unconscious bias that we may demonstrate in our interactions with one another. Professor Ruha Benjamin, who is a parent in our district and a professor at Princeton University, was a featured speaker at that event. 2 weeks ago, on January 11th, I was proud to be joined by a dozen administrators from the Princeton Public Schools at a workshop entitled Diverse Learners and Issues of Equity. It was facilitated by Dr. Eddie Fergus from NYU, and the day explored broad topics such as our district-wide definition of equity, and also it drilled down into ways to identify issues of equity with our current curriculum. On January 30th, members of our administrative team will attend another workshop. This one is focused on how to make the conversation about diversity central to our work in schools. And that conversation is becoming more central. At our last staff development day and the one coming up on February 17th, we are engaging various schools in activities and discussions that will raise our levels of cultural responsiveness, and we look forward to doing that work throughout this year and into the future. And we're looking to expand the conversation and the associated actions beyond our district. So this Thursday, I'll be joining the superintendents from Hopewell, from Lawrenceville, and from West Windsor to meet with representatives from Robert Wood Johnson Hospital about the possibility of funding something that I've never heard of in any other county or state, but it would be a county-wide diversity institute. It would be a place staffed by experts where throughout the year teachers and administrators can come together across districts to learn with and from each other about issues of equity. And finally, on this topic of diversity, I'm proud to announce that on February 1st, I guess that's next Wednesday, JW will be piloting a new elective for students entitled Race and Cultural Competency. The course will be facilitated by a new outreach coordinator, Monique Jones. 15 to 20 students we hope will be participating, and I truly look forward to having Monique share an update later in the year about the kind of conversations that our students are having on that topic. One of the items in our agenda tonight is the required review of the Violence and Vandalism Report. We do this twice a year. We look at results from September through December, and then we do it again in June at the end of the year. So this is our first opportunity to take a look at that. And you can see here the data from, this is the one I really want, from 2013 all the way through to the present. the final column is the delta or the change between the last 2 years, 2015-16, 2016-17. I guess the most important point to make is the small percentage of students this represents. We have almost 2,350 students between the middle school and the high school. We have 10 individuals who were involved in any of these categories of violence and vandalism, and that represents less than 0.5% of our entire student body between the middle school and the high school. Our numbers are very low. Our incidents in all categories are very low. You can see that the trend is, certainly the numbers were higher in 2013-14, and they've been dropping, 15 in the subsequent years. So we're making good progress, and it doesn't mean that there are not problems still happening in our schools. Kids will have conflicts, and we continue to work on conflict resolution. We continue to focus on ways of developing character. We continue to look at the new things that are entering into the lives of our young people, the social media issues that seem to plague students not only in school but at home, and how we can help with that. So we're continuing our work. I'm very proud of our efforts in this area, and I wanted to be able to share the results with the board and with the public. Any questions from members of the board about the statistics you're seeing here? Yes, Daphne.
The enrollment over, what percentage did the enrollment in, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, at JW and in the high school, how much did the enrollment increase? Just to understand the +5 in context.
I mean, from 15-16 to,
Like roughly, how many more students?
so at JW, probably up 65 students, and at the high school, 30, 40, something along those lines. I mean, it's true that when buildings get tighter, more conflicts can happen. I mean, I still think less than 0.5% is a really tiny number, if you're to compare our numbers with those of other high schools and middle schools. But it's a good question. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about the substance abuse?
Yes.
What all falls within substance abuse, and how do you?
So substance abuse would be illegal controlled substances, so drugs or alcohol. Typically, I mean, we have 2 incidents here. One was marijuana, and one, I believe, was alcohol under the influence.
On campus, you mean?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, or at a school-sponsored event.
Well, I think the other thing to point out, Steve, is from 13-14, which maybe is I don't know if that's a more representative sample, but if you look at the change from a longer period back, it's actually everything's going in the right direction. It's just from last year, which is a very low base.
Last year was a very low
Great
year.
right.
But the numbers are small. But you're absolutely right. If we were to go back 12, 13, 11, 12, the numbers would be more commensurate with what we're seeing in 13, 14, the larger numbers. So we're certainly moving in the right direction.
And if I remember, I know that was an effort of yours since you joined in student achievement a couple of years ago, where there was a focus on bullying and violence, and especially in the middle school. And I think we've made some progress there. And I think even though from last year it's up a tiny fraction of a person or two here or there, the direction over time is something that we should be satisfied about.
I think so, and I think our administrators, our teachers, and the students themselves, because I think the students look out for each other as well. So it's a community-wide effort. The other slide that I just wanted to share with you is the HIV Report Card, which we are required to post online. We do a self-evaluation. Each of our 6 schools has a safety team that takes a look at the categories that are listed on the left-hand side, the approaches, the program approaches, the training of our staff, how we integrate it with curriculum, et cetera, how we report, how we investigate. Our report card was pretty much perfect, but that doesn't mean that we don't have things that we want to improve on and focus. So you see some of the strengths listed here: our annual training, our timely reporting, our school safety teams, et cetera, the support we get from our community, and yet some of the next steps. And we could add certainly to this list, but I know that the middle school and the high school are eager to come together to share ideas and strategies, to share approaches that they're using to help students avoid getting into bullying situations and to share the kinds of consequences that are meaningful, so that we have a more logical continuum from 6th to 12th grade. Okay. Also on the agenda tonight, and I think in your packets that went out earlier, we have a draft of the school calendar for 2017-2018. That calendar, from a process standpoint, will be looked at in more detail by the Student Achievement Committee. I believe we have that on our agenda, Betsy. That will be this Friday afternoon, and then we'll bring it back to the board for hopefully a final draft in February. So we're getting feedback. I've had meetings with our PREA representatives about the calendar. Certainly the administration's looked at it. We've got a number of questions that are sort of hanging out there. The two questions that come to mind is in November, which is always a fragmented month, and there's no magic solution in the state of New Jersey to figuring that out. But one thought was to have a full day of conferences on Election Day. That would keep students out of the schools. Right now on the calendar, I believe it's listed as a half day, K through 8, and then conferences would be held. So that's a question we're taking a look at. It would eliminate one half day from the calendar, but it would also push the end of school back another day. The other question that came up was whether we start school in January after the winter break. We started on January 3rd instead of on January 2nd. Give people a little more time because it's a little bit shorter winter break. That too would have the consequence of pushing the end of the school year back from where it's ending now, assuming no snow days on June 18th. It would push it, which is a Monday, would push it back to a Tuesday or a Wednesday. So I know the board may or may not have comments or questions, but I'm happy to sort of jot those down. And Betsy, perhaps you can
Sure.
help me keep notes on this so that we
Sure.
can discuss it in student
For
achievement.
Friday. One question was, if Election Day is closed for conferences, would that be, these conferences are K-8, right? So would
Right.
high school remain in session on Election Day?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'd have to take a
And
look
so
at that.
would the school year then, if we had to
Well,
add
no,
a
that's a
day-
good question. That's one of the things we would have to really
Right.
talk about. I mean,
Right.
we wouldn't have to have
Right,
guys.
or if it adds a day to the calendar, does that actually add a day to high school that was already, if they were in session on Election Day?
Right, right.
I also think, I believe this year there was a half day after Halloween, so maybe an idea of sort of moving one of the conference half days up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not so concentrated just in 3 weeks. I think you're right, November's always the most difficult.
It's always very chopped up, yeah.
Most difficult issue.
And just going with what Betsy said about, so if we make November 7th a day off for K-8, then for the high school, since they all have an extra day, we could do graduation. Do you remember we were discussing that we were going to do graduation in the morning?
We did talk about
Yes.
that, yeah, as an option.
Right.
It might allow for that.
Yeah.
You might open that. Mhm.
Yeah. So more to come. We'll, and welcome more conversation with members of the board and certainly our administrative staff and PREA. Okay, and finally, I think the last thing that's on the agenda tonight that the board does need to take action on is the CUSAC equivalency application. So CUSAC, the Quality Single Accountability Continuum, is it's the state's way of monitoring school districts. So you see the categories that they list here. They look at curriculum instruction, fiscal management, governance, operations, and personnel. And they typically come every 3 years to school districts and do a site visit, pull our records, make sure that we're making the financial transfers the right way, that all of our teachers are appropriately certified, those kinds of things. We have done very well on those visits for a number of years, and the state is finding that it's would better use its time focusing on other districts. So districts that have been performing well for a period of time have been given the opportunity to have what's called an equivalency, so it would not involve a site visit. It would simply involve us taking a look at all of those categories and signing a statement of assurance that we have met the standards in those. So that's that's on the agenda for action tonight. And I think that's all I.
Public hearing.
So we- oh, okay, we-
When we go back to the, when you're done.
I'm done now. So you want to go back on the agenda to the violence and vandalism? Okay.
Well, before we go there, Ms. Kennedy, I just had a question or comments, Steve, about the diversity, your various, projects on diversity. And we've had a lot of those over the years, and, you've probably heard this question from me before in other contexts, but how do we, it's great to have a day of dialogue and those sorts of things, but there's 365 days in a year. And how do we measure progress there? Because I just feel like we keep, in terms of our constituents, the students, I'm not sure that we feel like we're moving in a direction that's making them satisfied that really something's changing. Maybe there is, but if it is, it's just how do we know that we're making, how are these initiatives, meshing in with real action on the ground? And how do we measure that? It might be just a really hard question because it's so subjective.
Well, no, I think it's a great question. It's the right question. I think that there's always a need for both conversation and action. The two go hand in hand. So what's nice about these days of dialogue, we had our first one last year. This year, this is, again, the superintendents in Mercer County recognizing that this is a critical issue for all of our students across our districts. So this year we've planned 2 days. One was in December. The other will be March, I believe. And the idea was to bring the same team of students and staff who attended the Day of Dialogue last year back to the one in December. And they developed diversity council at each of the schools to then develop an action plan, things that they wanted to implement to increase the level of diversity and understanding of racial literacy at the high school level. And the teams will be coming back at the day in the spring to report on progress. So that's one example. It's not just about dialogue, it is about action. I think that it's critical that our staff be taking, and they are taking, a leadership role in examining all of us doing a self-analysis of where we stand with our own cultural responsiveness, looking at the conversation at a school level and at a district level. You need to be able to feel comfortable wading into sometimes deep waters when it comes to talking about issues of race, culture, and class. And we need our faculty are eager to do that, but they want the training to be able to do that. And so we want to be able to take the appropriate steps to help them navigate those waters. And at the same time, I'm thrilled that we have a class starting at the middle school that's actually getting students to talk about it. I think there's probably elements in our social studies curriculum at the high school where we're examining that. Certainly our peer group curriculum has a unit now on race and culture that now will be shared with the peer leaders at the 12th grade level and with all of our freshmen. So it's a long journey, but I think we're taking the first steps.
Good, thank you. I think student achievement intends to have a focus on those sorts of issues over the year ahead, so I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we have to take action on the violence and vandalism report and the CUSAC equivalency.
Yes, first we have to hold a public hearing on the violence and vandalism item.
Okay.
So which means we just allow the public, if they have any comments on that
Very
specific
good.
topic.
Okay.
Any comments on the violence and vandalism report from the public? Okay.
Okay.
Ready for a motion?
I'm almost there.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, ready for a motion.
Okay, may I have a motion on the violence and vandalism report? Daphne, and a second, Connie.
Wait. I'll get faster.
Okay.
Okay, now.
All
that's
in
it.
all in
Okay.
favor?
Okay, I push the mark unanimous button and,
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, agenda item H3. Do we go to school calendar first, or this first draft, we don't need a motion on that?
No.
So now we're at the CUSAC equivalency application. Do we need public comment on that as well, Ms. Kennedy?
No, we do not.
Okay. So may I have a motion for, to accept the CUSAC equivalency application? Justin and Debbie?
Justin? Debbie?
All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? It's unanimous.
Wait, I gotta save.
Okay. On H5, the student suspension report. Do you need a minute?
I'm good now.
Okay. May I have a motion for
Motion.
the student suspension report? Thank you, Justin. Oh,
That we have to, go ahead, call the order, then there could be comments.
we'll do comments after the.
Yeah, second.
Second, anyone like to second?
Here, I'll second.
Thank you, Connie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any discussion on the student suspension report?
So this is what we had talked
Yeah, this is
about.
the resolution, just for the members of the public, these are the kinds of disciplinary issues that we talk about in closed session, so this was, but the resolution needs to be done in open session.
Okay. Ready for a vote? Any other questions or comments? All in favor? I have to abstain.
You abstaining?
I'll have to abstain because I wasn't in the.
He wasn't
closed
there.
session.
Okay, okay, just 1 second. Abstain, not present at vote. Okay. Abstain. Minute, let me see that again. Okay.
Okay. Item I1, the harassment, intimidation, and bullying report. May I have a motion? Thank you, Connie. And Daphne, second.
Wait, okay, I got Connie. Daphne.
Uh,
Okay, this is it.
He
Roll-
does,
This is,
Need to get faster.
yeah, just a show of hands.
Show of hands. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Finally,
Yep.
the HIV report card. I have a motion. Connie again, and Greg is a second. And may we have a vote? All in favor? Thank you, it's unanimous. Okay,
Okay, you're getting too fast now.
well, now I'm gonna move on to the next thing, but you
We
can catch up.
We got Connie and Greg, and we're gonna take a vote, and it was unanimous.
Unanimous, correct.
Okay.
And now we'd like to turn to board committee reports, and again, so that we make a little space in these meetings in the future for discussion of issues that are timely to our students and our community, we would request that the committee reports be tightened up a little bit rather than a listing of everything that happened, maybe the highlights of what happened. And, you know, we'll start with our student representatives, but we'll see if we can move this along. Of course, all of the agendas are in the public, your packages. If you have any questions, there's a public forum for agenda items coming up very shortly. So if you do have any questions on other things that happened that weren't reported out in committee, please feel free to come and ask questions about it. But it's a bit of a trade-off, given that we want to, you know, really engage people more. So, Brian and Abby, it's on you.
Can I make a statement?
Yes.
I apologize for not calling your names on the roll. Your names will be called next week. Mine.
You can just blame the technology.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So it's midterm season at VHS. Yay! And so, just kidding. And that means many students are stressing about tests and cramming at the cost of sleep. So as we walk around the halls during break, we see countless nervous students who are desperately trying to memorize those last few facts before taking their next dreaded exam.
But recently, we've seen a decline in midterms and final exams across the country. From Heightstown to Hopewell Valley, nearby school districts are taking action to refocus education on the learning aspect and the students. Data even shows that finals are on the decline in many universities in the United States. At Harvard, only 23% of undergraduate courses and 3% of graduate courses have final exams.
From the perspective of a 180-day school year, midterms detract from the instructional time. After spending a week reviewing the material from the first half of the year, then teachers and students must sacrifice an additional week in order to actually take those exams. So in hastily cramming the first 5 months of the year, students are often forced to repeatedly go over the same content right before the AP exams. Because of the inefficient learning structure, and that does not promote knowledge retention. Considering the May deadline for APs, it's no wonder several teachers have voiced concerns to us about losing many days to review. This puts our students at a disadvantage to the ones in other districts who have had those additional 10 days to learn. For me, I had a statistics midterm last year, and I know I reviewed everything in my AP review book, all the chapters we had already gone through, the review packets, and when it came to the AP, I didn't remember any of it. I had to review all of it again, and it just felt like kind of a waste of time to restudy all of that, even though I had already studied it halfway through the year.
In 2015, Maryland's highly competitive Montgomery County School District, which is the 17th largest public school district in the country, stopped administering midterm and final exams in response to increasing test pressures from the state government. In its decision, Board President Patricia O'Neill said, "While we can't control the outside assessments that are imposed on us, we can control the assessments that we impose on our kids. We're trying to regain more instructional time. Parents and educators want more teaching and less testing."
And the parallels at Princeton High School are clear. As PARCC gains more weight in teacher evaluations, it's become crucial to regain lost instructional time. Swiftly responding, Milburn Township Public Schools canceled final exams, and Livingston Public Schools canceled midterms in the last 2 years in response to the increase in weight for PARCC testing.
And such tests are too often based on how many facts a student can memorize in a limited amount of time leading up to an exam. Executive Director of the New Jersey Association of School Administrators, Richard Boza, argues, midterms and finals reflect the old standard of what can you keep in your head and spit out. Now it's all about how can you apply it? How can you show that you understand?
In educator John Ureck's The Wisdom of Finals, he notes that midterms and final exams do not align with the current trends of student-centered classrooms, project-based learning, and collaborative education. He observes that such assessments are done in a timed, isolated setting, with a student completing primarily recall questions in a passive, non-creative fashion.
And given these statements, the current exam structure at Princeton High School fails to encourage creative thinking. When students sit down with flashcards to memorize dates and vocabulary, people and numbers, the true purpose of midterm exams is lost. Instead of asking probing questions and employing critical thinking, students become instead focused on engaging a subject in a merely superficial extent.
David Jaffe, a professor of sociology at the University of North Florida, states, "Learning is too often equated with studying for exams. And, for many students, studying for exams means cramming, and a growing amount of research literature consistently reports that cramming, short-term memorizing, does not contribute to retention or transfer. Through perceivably counterintuitive, midterm and final exams are hindering the ability of students to actually learn the material of their classes."
Linda Sarah Hagedorn, Associate Dean of the Undergraduate Programs at Iowa State University, believes it is better to have a more holistic approach to learning when one learns in steadier and smaller increments instead of large chunks.
Some teachers and departments within Princeton High School have already taken steps towards alternate methods of using exam time and evaluating student progress. For example, a few of the AP World History teachers use the first half of the 2-hour block of time to administer a short practice exam that is not part of a student's final grade. This significantly reduces stress associated with cramming for the exam, I know because I took it last year, and allowing students to familiarize themselves with the AP structure while seeing the new areas they need to improve on. In the second hour, the teachers review the questions that were answered incorrectly so that students can have immediate feedback on their work and relearn concepts that they may have slipped their minds. All of this happens in a relaxed atmosphere that promotes understanding of the material.
And last year, our neighboring district of Westminster Plainsboro opted to eliminate midterm and final exams, and reasons given included teacher complaints about the difficulty of providing feedback to students and the inaccuracy of evaluating students based on too heavily weighted exams. The reality is that such exams make sense in the context of school districts that are struggling to meet state standards as a way of evaluating student progress. But in high-achieving districts like Princeton, where students are often doing twice the National Education Association's recommended amount of daily homework, they simply stand in the way.
On a separate note, in light of societal polarization, PHS has decided to organize events focused on building a sense of community. Tomorrow, 30 teachers in 56 classes have volunteered to participate in the first annual PHS Gives Back project.
And I just want to give a little bit of background for how this came to light. Stakeholders in the community at the high school came together to discuss how they could bring students and faculty together in the light of a period where we have become increasingly divided. And this is the first in a series of activities that are going to be planned out over the next few months to help increase a sense of unity within the school. And just to elaborate on what will actually be happening tomorrow, during periods 1 to 4, students will join a variety of service-based activities, including, as Mr. Cochran mentioned earlier, making lunches for Trenton Area Soup Kitchen, creating Valentine's cards for senior citizens, designing peace flags for Nepalese students. And then there are actually a couple more activities that are very centered around student-driven organizations, including making cancer care packages for Think Pink and creating sock puppets for patients of Operation Smile. And these were largely run by students with the help of their administrators for those activities. And hopefully these activities will provide students with a well-earned break from learning and testing while fostering a sense of unity and civic engagement. A big thanks to all the administrators, teachers, students, and volunteers that work diligently to make tomorrow a success. Thank you.
So I have one question, just in terms of the efforts that West Windsor Plainsboro School made. How, if there weren't midterms or finals, how did they evaluate what the teachers had taught the students and what the students had learned over the course of the year?
I believe what we've read is that instead of using just these 2 large tests at the end of each semester, they're breaking it down into a series of smaller tests that each have slightly higher weights, but are focused on what students are learning at the moment so that they don't have to go back and look through everything just to prepare for an exam.
Thank you. And also, you mentioned Harvard and their undergraduate program, that only 23% of those classes were giving midterms or finals.
Final exams, yeah.
How were those students evaluated? Do you know?
We're uncertain about that.
Thank you both. I have to say, attending these meetings before I became on the board, y'all's 2 presentations are always some of the most interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to say that. Not to my new board member colleagues. So you're somewhat proposing getting rid of midterms and finals a bit. How do you think students would feel about trying to get into colleges? And do you think the biggest impediment might be parents? Like, would parents say, no, I want my kids to have a good final exam because that's going to be necessary? How will the school district look to the schools they want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are concerns that parents raise about their children having to take midterms and final exams in colleges because, I mean, it's definitely a skill that they'll need there. I think that at PHS, though, like some of the alternatives we were mentioning, project-based learning and how the AP World teachers are using the time to go over practice exams. I know the AP Biology teachers do that as well. I think that it still creates a similar enough environment for the students to learn testing skills as well as studying skills. And I think that, I don't know if we're advocating for them to completely go away, but I think there needs to be a change from just fact-based learning, and I think we are headed towards more project-based.
Mm-hmm. And in the context of when students are considering colleges and how our school is evaluated, first of all, in terms of if you look at the report for the high school that is sent out by guidance to every single college every single year, you can see just the massive amounts of APs and high-level courses that our students are already taking, and I think that's very well reflected, and colleges are absolutely aware of that when they consider students coming from our school. And this does reflect a growing trend that is happening across the state, and it happens not just with us, but with a lot of other highly competitive school districts. And it really just comes down to oftentimes when we're forced to face increasing test pressures from the state, how exactly can we promote learning for the students when so much time is drawn out of their schedules to focus on memorizing facts for certain tests? So in the sense that if we remove midterms and finals, we really give students an opportunity to, first of all, reduce their stress levels significantly in that they're not evaluated based on these 2 large tests. And instead, they also gain time to study and learn the material more thoroughly, and we think that would be very beneficial to students.
You know, it might be interesting if you could find out how this whole system of midterms and finals came about. I think Debbie and Greg and I were at this new board members meeting, and one of the people there, at least I think in my group, was explaining why they do biology followed by chemistry followed by physics. And it was something around 1900, and they picked it because it was alphabetical. So maybe you'll find out that the midterm final has something equally scientific.
But guys, back to Mr. Doran's comments about assessment, and as I realize that these are stressful events. I realize these are stressful events, but they are about retention, and aren't the APs one big final exam? Every AP is a test of your accumulated knowledge of the entire course. So if you want to take it to the highest level with an AP Chem exam, you are tested on the material from day one. So wouldn't a midterm exam give you a checkpoint of how you're doing progressing towards that final exam? An assessment, while not meant to be stressful, if paced properly and studied in a paced, timely manner, doesn't need to be a stressful, crammed situation. You know it's coming from day one. An assessment is meant to be just that, a way of figuring out where you are as you're heading towards the end of the material. And a midterm is really a checkpoint. The weight would be dependent on the teacher, but to get rid of that assessment, I think, would be to the detriment of the student, because then you wouldn't know how prepared or unprepared you would be for the final exam, especially in the highest case of an AP, which is the grandest of all final exams. So while I appreciate all the reduce in stress, there is some tremendous merit to proper assessment and trusting the teacher for preparing you properly for that assessment, for pacing it properly, and for laying out an assessment that is fair and true to the level of course load that you've been doing. So if you have taken 4 APs, well, I'm sorry, but you're gonna have a tough week. Do you know what I mean? Like, I have compassion for the stress, but there's something to be said for learning and accumulating the knowledge. So I like the studies, I appreciate the studies, but back to Mr. Doran's fact, there has to be a way of assessing. But I am hearing the heavy weight means heavy pressure. So maybe there's something to be digested from that.
Just a-
Fair?
Yeah.
Just a question or comment. You know, you're asking about questions about assessment generally, whether it's midterm finals or whatever. You know, I've always been an advocate for no grading of homework. If homework's practice, why are we graded on it? And, you know, but at the end of the day, I suppose you've got to be assessed somehow. But I wonder, too, a couple of things. One is, this may be something that we, all of us, could simply encourage creativity within our teachers to look at. It doesn't have to be an overall policy, you know, for the school, like some of those districts that you mentioned. It might just be encouraging teachers to be creative about those kinds of things. I know, for an example, I'll call her out, Ms. Burstra, who teaches Japanese in the high school. I happen to have 2 kids who have been to her class. There's very little take-home homework, and I believe no midterm. I don't know what she does with the final. She routinely has kids who are scoring at the top. You know, they have a state sort of contest, and it's more for fun than for anything else, which also probably makes it easier to do better if it's really just for fun. But you know, her students routinely score at the top of New Jersey in terms of Japanese proficiency. No homework, no midterms, you know, but she gets the job done, and it's her choice as a teacher to you know, come up with the rubric that makes sense for her, and is very successful. So I wonder, you know, number one, could teachers just, you know, could we encourage all of our teachers to take chances, and if it works, it works. If it works, great. If it doesn't, you know, we try something else. And then I just wonder, Steve, how the strategic plan might address some of these issues of evaluation in a more broader and creative way.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that, Mr. Sullivan. So we have had lots of discussions about assessment and midterms and finals. And really, the fourth goal of our strategic plan is innovation, and the first objective under that innovation goal is project-based learning. So there is a lot of conversation about quality instruction and the value that's placed on applying knowledge through projects. My understanding in having conversations with administration and teachers about the way assessment takes place at the high school is that, in fact, many of the classes don't have midterms but do have projects. And it would be interesting to get the percentages on that. If you're in strictly AP classes, the structure may be somewhat different, but I do believe there are many classes that use projects rather than a fact-based midterm, for example, as you were describing. And we're going to continue to have those conversations. I really appreciate the balance of the questions around the table and the way we're allowing teachers to make the right pedagogical decisions for students based on their understanding of their course and their kids. In some cases, a midterm, a final may make sense. In others, there may be another assessment strategy that deepens learning. And those are the kinds of conversations that are taking place, and appreciate you bringing it up.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to our other committee reports. Start with facilities. Daphne Kendall.
Facilities met yesterday, January 23rd at 7:15 for approximately 2 hours. We received an update about the pending demographic study that is underway. We expect to receive preliminary information at the end of next week. We will discuss these preliminary results at our February board meeting and hope to have the final report by the end of the month. A new state law requires that schools test all drinking water in classrooms and kitchen areas. Drinking water sources in classrooms and kitchen areas. This is scheduled to be completed over spring break due to the testing protocols. We briefly discussed maintenance items to include on our 2017-18 budget, and our next meeting is Monday, February 27th here at Valley Road at 7:15. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance, Justin. Connie, sorry.
Doing finance
Okay.
today. The Finance Committee met January 23rd at 6 o'clock for an hour. We spent most of our time in training of our new board members.
Is your mic on?
Yeah, it is on.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Okay. Our next meeting will be February 27th.
Thank you. Personnel also.
Okay.
Connie, you're back on. Yeah.
The Personnel Committee meeting was held Monday, January 23rd. The committee reviewed the minutes for December 12th, 2016. Brian Dubinsky gave a presentation highlighting the achievements of our athletes. The alumni relations, Princeton alumni, and Brenda Sewell, community coordinator, presented to the committee a need to establish a database of PPS alumni. The committee discussed ideas such as establishing a speaker series for former PPI alumni as speakers, mentoring opportunities between alumni and students, establishing a Hall of Fame of PHS alumni, recognizing their extraordinary contributions to the community. District-wide job search update. Assistant principal, deadline for applications January 31st. Assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, deadline applications February 1st. Athletic director, deadline for applications February 3rd. New job at PPS. The committee approved the job description for equipment monitor. This is a pilot program for this year. An evaluation of this position will be discussed at the June Personnel Committee meeting to determine continuation of this position for next year. The committee discussed the process to be used for reappointments of tenures at the April 24th meeting. On Sunday, May 7th, the district will hold the first Walnut Lane Film Festival for high school students and middle school students at the Princeton Garden Theater. The committee discussed confidential matters related to personnel. Next meeting, Tuesday, February 21st.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, big meeting. Okay. And then, Betsy, I'll just call you up for two, policy and student achievement.
Exactly. Well, policy, we met January 17th at Valley Road. We did spend much of our time as well welcoming our new members and providing some background about the policy committee. We have 2 new policies that we've approved for a first reading that will come in February. One is related to the educational stability for children in foster care. The other is related to the education of homeless children, so these will be in our packets in February. We've identified a number of revised policies to discuss with our Director of Special Services at our February meeting. On tonight's agenda, there is a first reading of a revised board bylaw regarding board officers. The intent is to provide more communication between committees on the board and committee chairs and the full board. So that's on our agenda for this evening. The next policy committee will be February 13th at 1 o'clock here at Valley Road, and the public is welcome. For student achievement, it's a quick report. We did not meet since the last meeting, but we do have a meeting this Friday, January 27th at 12:30 in this room. The public is welcome.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to item K, the public forum, and this is for agenda items only. So if any members of the public would like to make comments about items that were on the agenda tonight, now is your time to step forward and do so. And seeing no motion from our audience tonight, we'll then move on. Thank you. Next, item M, personnel actions, and this items M1 through 3. Sorry. Do we have to do L? Anything in L since there's no vote necessary? I thought that's first reading only. So, okay. So there's no vote on L tonight. It's only a first reading on that policy, so we don't need to vote on it. Okay. And these are personnel actions in item M1 to M3, excuse me. May I have a motion? They're separate, so motion for M1. All right, okay?
Is it okay?
Yeah, motion for M1, please. Daphne, and a second, Betsy. And this is a roll call vote.
Call it. Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Betsy.
Yes. Sorry.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Yes. Yes.
Justin Doran.
Abstain.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Fern is absent. Okay. Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Connie Witter.
Yes.
And Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, ready for item M2? This is the job description. May I have a motion? Debbie, and a second, Justin. And again, roll call, this is a roll call or not roll
It's a
call?
no.
It's just a-
Yes, it's personnel. It has to be roll call, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Patrick, is there any discussion on this?
This would be the time to have any
Right.
discussion if you'd like to.
And
discuss.
the,
I'm sorry, can we go back to who first and second? I
First
was
and
a little
second?
behind. First?
Debbie and
Debbie.
Justin.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
one of the job descriptions is for the athletic department. Is anyone, okay. I think it's a great idea. Because we're currently posting for an athletic director and we are working with an interim, is it a good idea to start? And are we writing this job description to post, or are we writing this job description to fill our binder for a position that we're going to fill when we have an athletic director?
We're writing it to post. It's just a pilot program. It's going to be reviewed again at the end of the year.
At the
By
end,
that time, in June,
Right,
by
at the
that
end of the
time,
school year.
we'll have our new athletic director and we'll go from there. So it's just a temporary position. It's only a pilot program. It's just a stipend.
What's
They
the-
need the help.
I'm sorry, what's the purpose, why is there a need for that?
Well, because this time, the equipment in the athletic department, it's being misplaced.
I think
Someone
it's a
to-
great, position. Did you see the posting is just, it's an equipment monitor.
and
And it's a great idea. My concern is the timing, because depending on how the person is directed or how we use this position, I just have, first of all, the salary is much lower than
It's a stipended
Right.
position.
Okay.
And we're looking at actually $750 for one half of the year, $750 for the other half.
And I think that's
Yep.
phenomenally
The idea would be.
I think it's phenomenally low, because I feel like an athletic director might want to use this as I think it's a bigger job.
Maybe you're imagining a larger scope of the
Right.
job. This was something that our interim athletic director talked to the PE staff at the high school and middle school about, but it was essentially we have 11 PE teachers at the high school using equipment. We've got coaches going into various equipment closets, and we have after-school clubs that are often using equipment, and we're looking to create a system. And so things get misplaced or lost.
I totally agree with
So
it.
yeah, so let me finish. So we're looking to create the system for monitoring it, and then we would evaluate the position at the end of this year to see its merits and to see whether it should be continued.
Which is what you were trying to tell me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it would be evaluated by the person who's proposing we create it to see whether it has merit, and that person will decide at that point.
Terrific.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on M2? Okay, this is a roll call vote. Okay? Will you-
Patrick Sullivan.
Yes.
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Debbie Bronfield.
Yes.
Justin Doran.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Connie Witter.
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
Okay. And now finally, item M3, the frontline sub-calling system. May I have a motion? Daphne, and second Betsy. And again, this will be a roll call vote.
Let's see. Okay, Patrick Sullivan.
Yes?
Betsy Baglio.
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld.
Yes.
Justin Doran.
Yes.
Bill Hare.
Yes.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes.
Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Connie Witter.
Yes.
And Evelyn Spahn.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, moving right along, we'll try and get through this as quickly as possible, but again, if people have questions, we don't want to stop you from asking questions, but we will try and, this is item N, items N1 and N2, for educational consulting services and field trips. May I have a motion to?
Well, I believe we need to hold off. The overnight trips are actually on the student achievement
Yes, of
agenda
course,
for
right.
this Friday, so we need to table those.
Okay. N1, and we're deleting N2. Do we need a motion to delete, or we're just deleting it? So just a motion for N1 only. May I have a motion, please? Daphne, and a second. Connie. And this is just a show of hands. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. On to item O, Student Services and Special Education, items O1 through O4. May I have a motion, please? Justin, and second Connie. Yes, O1 through 4. Justin and Connie. Right. Ready? All in favor? Thank you. All opposed? None? Thank you. Any abstentions? None. Item P, Business and Finance. This is items P1 through P12. Need a motion, please. Connie, and a second. Greg. Okay, any questions or comments on O1 through O12? Hearing none, can we have a, P1 through P12. I don't want to confuse you, sorry. And the show of hands again? Thank you. All.
Is this not a roll call?
No, I'm in.
Is this a roll call?
No, it's not a roll call. This is P. We didn't have a motion yet. This is P1 through P12. Do we have a motion? I don't think so. So a motion on P1 through P12, Connie and Greg. We did have a motion now.
Yeah, we did.
Yes. Okay.
One question?
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
9, the transportation and the athletic busing.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Greg says.
Do we know what the variation in the second vendor's quote was almost double what the first vendor was? And what does this include in terms of athletic busing?
Okay, so over the last few years, we have contracted with one vendor, Rick Bus, to transport like 99% of all the athletic trips. Transportation has become an issue for all districts. Contractors are having hard times finding drivers, enough to supply, to drive for all districts. So part of the reason is because the CDL license has become tougher to obtain. So what has happened is when we plan to renew the contract with our contractor, they denied it, so we had to go out for bid. We went out for bid, their rates came in astronomical. So we did award, we rebid it 3 times actually. We ended up awarding it to a contractor for limited amount of transportation. And our wonderful transportation supervisor, Donna Braden, has taken on a tremendous amount of the after-school activity busing, athletic busing, and is actually saving money. But she only can do so much as well.
By using in-house?
By using in-house,
Yes.
by using our own buses, yeah. So we have 3 levels right now. We have the contractor, we have our in-house busing, and then there was a shortfall of being able to cover all of the spring coverage. So we had to do another quote or bid, and that particular vendor was lower. It's a small group, it's a small company,
Right.
so that's why the rates are lower.
Great.
done is excellent.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on P1 through P12? Okay. May I have a show of hands, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, so while you're recording that, I'll just ask the board members if there's anything under item O that you'd like to raise under old business and new business. Hearing none. This is our last public comment session. Moving right along. Our last public comment session is item R. Again, any topic, anyone in the public who'd like to speak, this is your last chance tonight to do so. Dr. Correll. Always great to hear from you.
Oh, I don't need 15 minutes. Actually, when I came here tonight, I was only going to speak about one quick thing, and then the discussion brought a couple of things to mind. So my thing that I wanted to speak to you about was the school calendar. And this is my 20th year here. And the way we do snow days has just flabbergasted me since I started. I just don't understand why we don't build at least a couple of snow days into the school year. Because at the high school, those last few days, oh, but my parents scheduled this or that because graduation was supposed to be. Now, I realize, we're going to have some extraordinary years like Hurricane Sandy, et cetera, but to not schedule maybe 2 snow days around Memorial Day weekend, that you can have a 5-day weekend if it doesn't snow, and then just have those 2 snow days built in. So there isn't a big change. I mean, I think about families with relatives who are coming from out of state, trying to plan around, especially if they're coming from overseas. We have a lot of international students. I just think it seems to make sense that if we could have a more fixed date for graduation, it would be better in the long run. That's just my opinion. Okay? The order of the sciences, I couldn't tell from the back who made that comment, but I will tell you, we do that specifically because of the math skills. Okay? You can't teach physics to freshmen with calculus because they don't know calculus yet. And for chemistry, it's better if they've had algebra 2 already. So that's more or less the reason we do it in the order. In college, when I was a undergraduate biochemistry major, I wasn't allowed to take a bio course until I had finished 3 semesters of physics, a full year of inorganic chemistry, and a full year of organic chemistry before they would have let me take a bio course. So it just has to do with the math. There are discussions about doing physics first. It's something that's happened at various places around the country, and it's not something we're ruling out, out of hand. I'm just saying that's why we've done it in the past. In terms of midterms and finals, there's more to be learned than on Google. If you actually pick up the phone and ask, or maybe just talk to a couple of people. I have a son who's a junior at West Windsor. He took his chemistry midterm last week. He has his AP Psych midterm tomorrow. They just don't have midterm exam periods. They still have midterm and quarterly exams. I will tell you, as someone who's taught courses where there's a midterm that counts, that there are some subjects that are so esoteric to the students that it sometimes takes a second or a third time of relearning it to really understand the topic. And sometimes they really don't get it the first time through, and the midterm is a good way to get to it when they relearn it. I will tell you, my experience is that students have become experts in what I call test and purge. They learn, they cram for the test, and there is no long-term learning. So I agree with you. Memorization of facts, we don't need to do that anymore with Google, but we can ask better questions on midterms and finals. Could it be also that the stress that you're feeling around midterms has to do with the number of high-level courses that you're taking, and perhaps that's part of the problem? I will tell you, I had this comment from a student. Midterms don't feel as bad as some other times because every teacher gave me an exam either the Friday before the winter concert or the Monday of the week of winter concerts, because we had rehearsals Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then that Friday is a 12:30 dismissal. So, and then you can't give a test for 2 days after you come back because of the homework-free period. So everybody jammed the test in, and they said that period was worse. So sometimes with a well-intentioned policy, you have to watch out for the unintended consequences. That's it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Crow. As always. Yes, as always great to hear from you. Any other members of the public would like to
Oh,
speak?
can I just ask a question about the calendar, Steve? What is the your rationale behind not building in snow days?
Honestly, it's the way the calendar I inherited and the process that I inherited. I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't build in those days. As soon as you do that, you'll get Hurricane Sandy or 11 snow days, as I had in my first year as a superintendent. So the calendar will go out the window. So it gives you a greater margin for error, but I'm not sure you're ever going to be able to guarantee that that the high school graduation is going to be on a set day or the 180th day will end on a given day.
Is it a state mandate that graduation has to fall on the 180th day? Or are there districts that sort of choose the third Friday in
So
June?
yeah, it is a state mandate that
Okay.
students have to attend 180 days, all right? So you could have it later, but it's harder to get students to
get
come
students
back.
there. But I didn't know for the
but
purpose of just the
there are
cele-
there are absolutely districts who, of course, they
Choose
have to book a venue and they fudge on that for understandable reasons. We've been blessed to be able to hold graduation many years on our own property, so our own high school front lawn. So we've been able to get around that.
Okay, Ms. Jacklew.
Hi, Paula Jacklew, Princeton High School, teacher, parent of students that have since graduated. I have a couple of things that I'd like to bring up. First, with the school calendar, I'd like to echo what Dr. Carell had said about building in snow days. I think it's very wise. I remember it was one of the first years that I was here. We had ice, and we had ice, and we had more ice. And you could still see the evidence of it. And when you go up into the Sourland Mountains, the trees at a certain age, they just bend at a 90-degree angle, and then they go upright. So they grow like this, then they go like this, then they go like this. And that's from that ice storm. And I remember it was at least 2 weeks that we couldn't get into the high school. So I would hope that we could build those days in, because I think it makes a lot more sense, and it protects us from when we do get these really bad storms. Maybe we might get the snow, maybe we might not, but we are experiencing climate change. Oh, I forgot, we're not. Okay. But we're experiencing something where the South saw an amazing amount of damaging weather just this weekend, and they've already surpassed the death toll for 2016 in terms of tornadoes. I heard on the news just last night. Having also said that, that's one thing. The other thing is graduation on a Monday. Man, this is the third time that this has occurred in probably 5 or 6 years, and it's a bear to set up for an event like graduation on a Monday. That's all I would say about that. So those are my comments regarding the calendar. Okay, then there's regarding the midterm exam thing. I know that the science teachers, we've been asked to realign our curriculum towards next generation science standards. So we spend the whole year with kids working collaboratively. We call those labs. We have them do project-based learning. I know my kids do science projects, but at some point, there needs to be the time that the student sits down and proves what they know. And I know that my colleagues do not ask these types of exams where we have kids simply spit facts at us and dates. That doesn't happen in science. I would consider very carefully the ramifications of not offering students that testing experience. It's going to build towards more anxiety when they do take the PARC or whatever the test du jour is that the state sends down to us. the effect on teachers, especially when they're considering linking student achievement to teacher ability. If you're going to take away that chance for that teacher to offer them the test, by the way, that is the most meaningfully crafted towards what has been experienced in the classroom. I know that the biology teachers at the high school and myself, we've met afternoon after afternoon after afternoon on our own time, going through what questions we would give students on a midterm, looking at every word, choosing the best diagrams to get the most bang for the buck, in essence, out of each question. And so I would just say that I think that that would be a loss to do away with midterms. And again, I would leave that up to the teacher to determine. They're the best judge. Not allowing the teacher that is like dictating to doctors or telling them, you know, you're running a little bit too many tests. You know, you should run a little less of those heart stress tests and blood tests. Well, they're stressful too because, you know, your patients don't like to see the blood. And you know those colonoscopies, that you got to really cut down on those because we're getting so many complaints. I'm just trying to draw analogies that sometimes you have to be a little bit uncomfortable in order to truly know if you are learning the subject material. So the last thing I'd like to say is I walked with a whole bunch of other great women this weekend down in Washington, and it was just such a pleasure to be in the company of, I don't care what Trump says, I've been doing this for a couple of decades. There were well over 750,000 women in Washington, and men, and children, and dogs, puppets, everything. And to be able to be in a crowd with 750,000 people and not bump into a single rude person the entire time, high-fiving National Guardsmen, it was just really a surreal, beautiful experience. And that leads me to my last point, and that involves what we're teaching here in terms of science. I think if we want to make the experience a little less stressful, especially in the area of science, we've lost earth science at the high school. I do not understand how you live on planet Earth and you don't offer a course called Earth Science. And I think that some of it has to do with the stigmatism associated with being in that course, that it's for dummies, that it's for losers, it's for kids that aren't going anywhere. But I don't understand that mindset. I love Earth Science. I've taught Earth Science in the past. I can't think of a course that engenders itself more towards project-based learning, towards creativity, and towards all of the things that these two young people here mentioned. When I taught students, when I look at what's happening in this country, we are so isolated here. I do not know how students here could talk to some of the people that I see on a day-to-day basis once I leave Princeton. And these are people that voted for somebody who wouldn't have done so well here. In other words, people that are more liberally minded being able to talk with people that are more conservatively minded. And I think that offering courses like Earth Science would allow kids to explore those possibilities. I think what we've lost as a society, and I'm not saying this is necessarily here in Princeton with everyone, but it is certainly with some students, we're losing the chance to teach kids about why it's important to tell the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is, and especially if it's about ourselves. Kids can give mouth speak about why it's important to care for the planet, but they don't give a damn about recycling. They throw their food, they throw their aluminum cans, they throw almost all of it into the garbage on a daily basis. True, some recycling is being done, but I've dug through the trash too many times, and it is not happening. How to teach them to be active citizens, not to just say or be able to put a bunch of clubs down so that they can get into the college, but to actually roll their sleeves up and want to do it, and to care about the collective, not just themselves, not just their own little group, but the collective. And we have certain children that haven't learned that. And I think we could get that if we were to expand some of our courses. So I know I've been a little bit long, but I think with everything going on in the country, I like a lot of people, have been doing a lot of introspection about what we're doing and how to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jacklew. Anyone else for public comments?
Hi, my name's Christian Martin. I'm a student at Princeton High School, and I think Ms. Jacklew's very moving words are kind of a perfect segue on something I just wanted to inform you of that I've noticed. So I'm a little biased because I'm a huge politics nerd. I run a politics club, and I think, frankly, this election, it's really opened my eyes to the fact that discourse and the ability to have discourse and critically think about what you're saying. And I mean, even as Ms. Jacklew said, to tell the truth and to want to really seek out the truth, that's something that's very lacking. And it pains me so much to see in my classmates so much apathy and so much kind of, what's the point of arguing? Who really cares? Because I think we should care. And I think a class like an earth science class, or just a class that's meant, a class on racial literacy, I'd heard something about that coming to JW. I think that could be really interesting. But I think we, as a school system, are failing our students if we are not teaching them how to uphold their civic duties just as well as their academic and their intellectual ones. I think if they're not able to go to a college and have an honest, open discussion on what they believe, to be able to listen and not just hear, I mean, how are we doing our job as preparing them to live to learn if people are so closed-minded that they've grown up knowing what they know and there's no interest to them what's actually true or what other people think? Because, again, what Ms. Jacklew said, it's important. There are 320 or so million people in this country. Many of them disagree with every student at Princeton High School. And I think it's very important that we realize we need to be able to talk to them. We need to be able to understand the millions of other members of this country. And frankly, I just do not, I believe in my heart of hearts that many of my fellow students are ill-prepared to have the important discussions they must have as students. So I know that there are only 180 days in a school year, and I know it's so difficult. I do see how you guys struggle to find times to work in different activities and workshops and assemblies and speakers, but I think it's something very important. I really do personally hope that it's something that gets onto the board's plate to look into. How can we ensure that we are preparing our students to not just be ready to work, but to be ready to be American and uphold our democratic values? Thank you again, of course, as always, for being here. I know I speak on behalf of many of my students. We so appreciate your time and energy to make our educational experience better. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Christian. Any other comments from the public? Okay, we really appreciate everyone's thoughts and comments tonight. We encourage that, and I think we'll continue to find topics that we can come together as a community to discuss and think about ways that we can improve what we do around here. So appreciate all your thoughts. May I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, Justin, and second, Daphne. And as soon as we enter it into the system.
I think you're good at the
Yeah. Are we good? Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Show of hands.
Oh, so sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.